אוקיי. Hi everybody, חג שמח. Okay, so this place, so let's start. Did you bring your laptops? Yes? Okay, because we're going to do again like last time with pandas. I really want you guys to practice in real time. I also didn't load yet the lectures from last time. I'm going to load all of the material about panda in one batch. So this is again a short recap of what we did so far. So last time we added two topics, the logging, on which I will give a small correction on what we said last time, and we started talking about pandas. So today is Nahala here today. She's not here today. So based on the question I had last time, I'm going to give you a recap and a correction of what we talked about logging. So we're going to spend a few minutes on this to make sure you're able to use the logging package in the correct way. And then we will talk about pandas, more advanced topic in pandas. And we might have time to speak a bit about object-oriented coding, but next time will be dedicated to this topic. We don't have time to talk about it today. So let's start with logging. Okay, so let's assume that you want to have two modes for your code, okay? One mode in which it tells you what it's doing. I'm fine with you guys bringing laptop. I actually want you guys to bring laptop, but it means that when we're not practicing, you're listening, okay? Okay? Good. So let's assume you want to have, otherwise we're just going to change the mode, and I will ask you guys to come without your laptops. So let's assume you want to have two modes of coding. One mode while you're debugging, where you want the code to explain you what it's doing, okay? So you want it to tell you, I'm now calculating this and this value. I'm now making a NumPy array which is doing this and this, okay? And then you want to switch to a mode which is much less chatty, okay? Once you know that your code is working, you don't want it to output all of this text, okay? So there is one very easy way to do this, okay? You can set a parameter, say verbose, okay, to true or false. And you can tell it if verbose equal true, print I'm doing this and this, and then if verbose equal false, it wouldn't print it. Okay? This is the most naive way to do this. Is it clear for everybody? Okay, this is the most naive way to do this, and it allows you for two modes. Okay? One mode which is telling you what it's doing, and one mode which is not. Okay? What logging allows you to do is that it has 5 different levels of how chatty it is, okay? So instead of having a binary option of either it talks with you or not, okay? You have 5 levels of, how to say resolution? I don't know. Okay, so you have 5 levels of resolution of how chatty you want it to be, okay? If you want it to be very chatty, you would set the default level to debug. And then every time you print a message with the debug level, it will print the debug level and all other levels, okay? This is important to understand. In the debug level, logging will print everything. In the info level, it will not print everything, it will print info and beyond. It will not print the debug messages anymore, okay? If you set it to warning, it will only print the message which are warning and beyond, which is warning, error, and critical. It will not print the debug message and it will not print the info messages anymore. Make sense? And if you set the level to critical, it will only print those messages that you've labeled as critical. So this is the reason it's so such a convenient package to use, is that it allows you to adjust the level of how chatty you want it to be with you. Okay, and I'm going to show you a very simple example now. Okay, how you can adjust it. So you don't have to use all these levels. Okay, you can choose to use 2 levels, and then it will just be as good as the most naive verbose parameters that you can set. Okay, but you can also choose to use 3 levels or 5 levels. Okay, 5 is the maximum, and honestly, I don't think you need 5 levels. But you can at the end. Okay, when you're sure about your code, you can set it to critical, and it will only print the super critical messages that you always want to see. Okay, and in one line of code you can play with the level of verbosity. So let's look at an example. So this is from last time. Okay, I'm going to go Payton and so let me get out of this. The computer is black. Okay, so we need still black. We need a large font, right? Okay, so okay, so I'm going to import PDB so that we can stop the code halfway. Import PDB. Okay. Okay, so this, as I told you, is the most basic way to set things. Okay, I've taken a parameter. I could call it cake. I've called it verbose. This is pretty standard convention. Okay, so I've called it true, and if verbose equal true, it will print stuff. I'm doing this and this. Okay, and I'm explaining you what the code is doing. Okay, this is the naive things, and then when you're happy with it, you can set verbose to false, and it will not print things anymore. But this allows you for 2 levels of chattiness. Okay, now let's do now the logging option. Okay, so I'm using the logging package. Okay, and I'm setting it to debug. And let's see what happens. Okay, so what do you think will happen now? It will print all the messages, right? Because debug is the most basic level. Okay? Okay, so did it do it? Yes, it did. It printed the debug message, the info message, the warning message. You see, it printed all the messages. Now let's set the level. See, it's 1 line at the top of your code. Let's now set the level to warning. So which messages will it print? I need to put it in capital. Okay, so which messages will it print? The warning message, the error message, and the critical message, right? So let's see. Okay, it's doing what we said. Okay, And of course, it will be exactly the same if you use this the text file option, which we discussed last time. Okay, so it will only save to the log file those messages depending on the level of chattiness that you decided. Okay, and let's give one last example. If you set it to critical, it will only print the critical message. Okay, so I hope it's clearer now that it's a bit of an artificial, the reason we need the logging package. We could also do a similar thing, and instead of setting one verbose parameter, we could set 5 different verbose parameters, okay, and tell it if verbose 1 equal true, print blah blah blah. If verbose 2 equal true, print da da da, okay. But the logging package already has these things built in, okay. You don't have to customize it, and you just have to decide for yourself which level of importance a specific message is, okay, and then you have to set the level of chattiness that you want for your code at the top of your code. So I really encourage you to use this. It's really helpful for debugging purposes. Yes.
אבל את פשוט כותבת לו מה לכתוב. את כותבת לו login.info, this is an info message. כאילו, את כל פעם שאת עושה משהו בקוד, את צריכה לכתוב את המלא שורות האלה, או מה את צריכה לכתוב כל פעם?
What's your name? מה השם שלך?
אורי.
Ori. So Ori is asking me, what do I need to write in the code? Okay, you're saying that it's a bit of a... So, usually, if you're not to use the logging packages, instead of logging.debug, you would write here print, right? Okay, so it's slightly longer, but not that longer. And what's this? Okay, instead of writing print here, you write logging dot something. Okay, and this allows you to control how often you want this message to appear. Okay, if you want this message to appear only if you're running in a debug mode, you would write here debug. If you want this message to appear only if it's super critical, okay, we would set here critical. Okay, this is like a print. It's exactly the same as a print command, but the difference with the print command is that this command gives you control on whether you want this print command to appear or not. You understand?
פה זה בצבע אדום
אז מה זה צבע אדום? לא, זה לא שגיאה. ככה זה מופיע בפייתון. אוקיי, אתה מבין? זה כאילו שיש לך פה פרינט, אבל הוא פרינט רק כשהמוד, הדיפולט מוד שלך זה דיבאג. אתה מבין?
כל פעם שאני רוצה לעקוב אחרי משהו במהלך הקוד, אני כותב login.debug, this is a... כאילו...
כן, אבל בידיעה שאם אתה תכתוב למעלה login basic level שווה לקריטיקל, אז כל ההוראות שכתובות login.debug לא יופיעו כשתריץ את הקוד.
הבנתי.
אוקיי? זאת אומרת, הדבר הזה מאפשר לכבות ולהדליק פרינטים מסוימים. אוקיי? So I will repeat this in English. This is like a print command, but it's a print command that you can turn on and switch off with one line at the top of your code that controls how chatty you want your code to be. Okay? Make sense? Highly encourage you to use this package.
וזה בעצם מיועד כדי לכתוב מה אני עושה בקוד שאני אוכל לראות ולהבין?
כן. It's a debugging helper.
יש לך דוגמה לקוד שמדגים את השימושים של כל אחד מהרמות? כאילו...
So the use, it's really personal. Okay, how you want to use, you might... So personally, I like it when my code is super chatty. So I tend to use the debug... to either set my code on the debug level or define everything as warning. Okay? But it depends on you. You decide for yourself when you want a message to appear and how chatty you want your final code to
כאילו
be.
אומרת זה יהיה צ'טי, אבל אני לא באמת יודע בפועל איך זה, כאילו מה זה אומר. כאילו כמה זה, אם אפשר לראות את זה בפועל איך זה עובד.
אבל זה מראה את זה בפועל. זאת אומרת, אם אתה כותב רק לוגינג דיבאג בכל הקוד שלך, אוקיי? אז כל פעם, אז אם תכתוב למעלה לוגינג שווה לקריטיקל, אז הקוד שלך לא ידפיס כלום. ואם תכתוב רק לוגינג נקודה קריטיקל פה, אז כשתכתוב למעלה לוגינג נקודה דיבאג, הם כולם יופיעו. אתה מבין? זה כל אחד צריך להחליט כמה הוא רוצה לכלול בדברים שהם קריטיים, וכמה הוא רוצה לכלול בדברים שהם לא כאלה קריטיים. Yes.
Is there any comment that you can turn off all of them?
Sorry?
I mean, the way you turn off this printout is to set a higher level. Is there any way that you can turn off all of them?
Yes, I mean you can never use logging. You can choose to use only these guys and then set the level to critical, and then it won't print any message, right? This is the way to turn off all the messages. Okay, so everyone has to decide what is included in each level. But logging doesn't tell you how to do it. It just allows you for a platform that has 5 levels of chattiness. Okay?
If I don't have that top line, it doesn't just not print anything. It will still print something.
I don't know. Let's try. So it might be that there is
It stays long.
it might be that the default is warning.
It's not just the last thing you did.
I don't think, because the last thing we did was critical. Okay, so it's working. The logging package is working in a way that the default level, if you don't specify it, is warning. Okay. Good. Now we'll go back to pandas. Okay, and so now everyone is welcome to take his laptop. Okay, so last time we went through everything until here, I think. Okay, I showed you the describe magic commands, and we went through the basic features, the columns, index, what we mean by a data frame, how we can define a data frame. Do you remember the different methods to define a data frame, to populate a data frame? So we saw 3 ways, right? One way, actually 2, yeah, we saw 3 ways. Do you remember? Can you?
Data frame,
No.
Okay, so there was one way which was to read the data from a CSV file, and this will be the ultimate way that you will use, right? Because in your research project you will be given the data in the form of a file, and to start doing analysis on this data you'll have to read this data. Okay, so Panda from CSV is the way to read from a file, and then there were 2 other ways. One way was to define the data frame as a dictionary, remember, with the keys. The keys were the columns names, okay? And another way was to define separately the column names and the data, and we gave it, in this case, we gave it the data as a NumPy array, right? So we saw 3 ways. We saw that Panda is really good at helping you with data with mixed types, right? We had integers and floats and strings in the same data, and it didn't complain about it. And we saw that we can easily convert a data frame to a NumPy array. The conversion to NumPy allows you to do this conversion. And we started seeing some magic commands like the describe command that does some statistics, very basic statistics on your data. So today we'll start by talking about how to select data. Okay, there are several ways to select data. So how would you select data if you are dealing with a NumPy array?
You slice the column and all.
Okay, so you slice it, right? NumPy doesn't understand the column names. It doesn't care about column names. So the way to select data is to slice by indexes, right? Now, it does the work, but sometimes you have data with 150 column labels, okay? You have 150 columns and a million lines, okay? And I'm now telling you, select the data that gives you the age of the people in your file and the color of their eyes, okay? So you can start to count, okay, which column is the age of the people. It might be the column number 121 or 122, and the eyes colors can be the second columns or the 150th column, and it's very easy to do mistakes. And it would be much nicer if you could just do select age, select colors, eyes colors, or the names of the column. Okay, so Panda allows you to do this, and this is what we call selection by labels. Okay, so don't do this for the moment. I'm going to talk about two types of selections, and then we'll try. Okay. So when we talk about selection by label, we mean by column names, okay? By names of the columns. And we use labels instead of column labels because if you remember, the lines too in pandas can be labeled, right? They can be labeled with indexes, which are integers from 0 to the length of your data. But last time, if you remember, we also had a data frame where the lines were labeled H, I, J, K, L, M, okay? So when you select by label, you select by names, either column names or line names. And the way to do this is with the lock function. So we'll see in a second how to use it. And we'll see the difference. We'll also see the at function and what's the difference between lock and at. So there is another way to select things, which is closer to what we know already, which is selecting things by position, okay? Just like in the same way you would do in a NumPy array. So if you're new to pandas, usually when people have been working with NumPy for a long time and are new to pandas, it's easier to do slicing, okay? So you can do exactly the same thing as you would do with NumPy with iLock, okay? So in general, pandas function that works with labels have a name, and if it's the same function that works on positions, they would be the same name with an I, okay? We have the same situation with the function called at that acts on labels, and if you want it to act on position, it's I at, okay? I'll show you an example in a minute. So you can do slicing, and you can do slicing in this way. You can give it specific positions, okay? You can use iLock with specific positions in your data frame, and iLock is basically allowing you to use the data frame in the exact same way as you would use NumPy data. So if you find yourself using iloc a lot, it probably means that you're not using pandas at the best of its opportunities, capabilities. Okay, it probably means that you got used to NumPy arrays and you're trying to use panda data like NumPy. Okay, so let's look at a few examples of loc and iloc. Do you still have the file from last time?
The example. Yeah.
Yes.
What's the command from CSV?
PD dot from CSV. So we call it lecture 8. Okay, so I'm importing pandas as PD. I'm going to import NumPy 2 because it's always useful. Okay, okay, and I'm going to load the data. It was read CSV. Okay, example file. It's the pandas one. Okay, and let's just remind ourselves what the data looks like. Okay, so it was a file with one string. Okay, with mixed types. There was one string here, the high one. Okay, and this is the data we're working with. Okay, so now I'm going to show you things, and I'd be happy if you try it in parallel. So let's try to select the A and B. We're starting with selection by labels. Okay. So we're trying to select column A and column B, okay? So I'm doing, so try to do it with what we said, and you can look at what I'm doing at the same time. A, B, and the syntax here is important. Okay, so this is the syntax. I'm telling it here that I want all the lines, columns A, and I'm giving it a list of columns that I want. Okay? Everybody managed to do it? Good. Okay, now let's assume that I now want to select by both lines and labels. Okay? So here my lines are indexed with integers. Okay, so I can decide to select line 5 to 14. Okay, and you see that here it's kept the indexes. Okay, this wouldn't happen in a NumPy if you're doing slicing of a NumPy array, right? So if you slice a NumPy array, it doesn't keep any record of the fact that you sliced it, right? And this is very cool. This allows you to keep a record of what you did. Okay, every now and then you should use, you remember I showed you last time the command set index, reset index, okay? So every now and then you should reset the indexes so that you don't do, if you try, for example, to concatenate two data frames where the indexes are not aligned, it will complain. But this allows you to keep a record of what you did. Okay? And I'm just going to show you, just for the purpose of completeness, if I have instead, let's take the data frame from last time, which had letters indexes. Okay, so if I define instead a data frame with letter indexes, df, okay, and I want to slice it by a specific index, I would use lock, and so the first argument is not a list, doesn't have brackets. This is important if you want the syntax to work. Okay, so this is going to slice it to take all the indexes between, well, JK is not a good choice, but let's take J and M, okay, and column A and B. Okay, so this is the data frame. The indexes here are not integers anymore, they are letters, and here I've sliced it by labels of columns and labels of indexes. Okay, so give it a try. Make sure that you understand how it works.
הליסט הזה שעשית ליסט אז HIJK, הליסט זו פונקציה?
איזה ליסט? זה?
כן.
זה מה שראינו בפעם הקודמת, איך לייצר דאטה פריים שהאינדקסים שלו הם לא מספרים.
כן.
כן.
אז הליסט הזה זו פונקציה?
כן, זה. ליסט. It's a function that works on strings and makes a list of all the letters of the string. Okay? Okay, so this was just to show you that we can slice by labels, that slicing by labels doesn't necessarily mean choosing columns. You can slice by labels on lines too. Okay? So let's go back to our file tabulated data. So let's look at the difference between two things, which is pretty important. So if you do this, and if you do this, I want you to be aware of this difference because it can be very misleading. Okay, so I'm putting a separator here so that you see the difference. Okay, so this command, okay, df lock 1 and a without a list, okay, this gives me the value, okay, the value of the table at this index. Okay, what did this give me? This is actually an object. Okay, it's not the value itself, it's a data frame actually. It's a small data frame, it's a 1 by 1 data frame. Okay, so this is something that you should be aware of. These small syntaxes differences can cause problems. Okay, so if you want the value at the position as opposed to a small data frame with this value, you should not put the brackets, or there is another option. You can use a function called at, df at 1. Let me look, yeah. So this would be the value 2. Okay, these two things are similar. The at gives you access to a specific position.
Well, why use it if you need to put in the same indexes?
Why use it if what?
If you're putting in the same indexes, then what's the point of that?
So it gives you, so at will always give you values as opposed to data frames.
It'll complain if you get that data.
Okay, so at is accessing the actual value at the position. Okay. Okay. So let's now look at what?
שעשית עוד סוגריים על ה-A, זה הביא לך גם טבלה 1 על 1?
כן. אתה רואה שפה הוא שמר על ה-A הזה.
כן. A אבל זה הזה של העמודה.
כן.
אז למה זה פתאום מביא אותו כאילו כמסמל של השורה?
כשהשארתי את הברקט, הוא שמר זכר שזה היה בקולום A. אוקיי?
וזה קיצר אותו גם? כאילו גם קיצר את המינוס, את המספר?
Okay, this is a good question. I don't think it actually shortened it. I just think it's the way it's displayed. I think it's a display thing. זה לא מקצר באמת, זה הצורה שבה הוא מציג. By the way, so you can control if I was putting here data with 100 columns, by default PyCharm would not show you 100 columns. Okay, it would show you a few columns and 3 dots and then the rest. And this is something that you should ask Google how to do this, but you can control this. Sometimes you want to see the 100 columns and you can set it in one line of code. Okay?
גם פה העבר כאילו אחד בעמודה של A זה המספר המקוצר, אז מאיפה הבאת את המספר הארוך יותר?
כי זה בדיוק מה שאני אומרת עכשיו, זה מה שאתם רואים פה, זה תלוי באיך הדיפולט שאיך פייתון מציג את המספרים, זה לא תלוי באמת באיזה מספרים יש שם, אוקיי? אם יש פה מספרים עם 10 מספרים אחרי הפסיק, אז אלא אם כן תגיד לו להציג את זה, הוא לא בהכרח יציג את זה בפייתון.
אבל פה המספר יותר קצר.
כן, אבל אם תסתכל בדאטה, המספר יותר ארוך. אוקיי? טוב. Okay, so now we saw examples of slicing by labels. Okay? And the next step is to slice by positions. Okay, so do you remember the command to do this?
iloc.
iloc, very good. Okay, so let's give an example. So I want to print df. Which one do you want to print? Try it for yourself. Okay, so this is if I want to print. Okay, let's see what happens. What do you think will happen if I do this?
We'll print the third row.
The third row?
The
entire
Yes.
line.
The entire line? Okay. Good. It's printing the entire line in a pretty weird way, but this is what it's doing.
למה מעיין זה עושה ככה ולא אחד תחת השני? זה בוחר כאילו ככה, זה צורת
זה מה שפנטז עושה.
שאל אותו.
But if you do this, I think might be wrong. Yeah, okay. So this actually, let's look at what happened here. So this is a data frame. When Pandas is showing you a 1D data frame, this is what it's doing. It's putting them one on top of each other. But you see that if I asked it the A, okay, it's actually accessing the first one. Okay? So this was to select a line. Now let's assume that I want to select a specific position, okay, as opposed to a line. Okay, so this is giving me third line, 1, 2, 3. Second column,
it's
1,
the
2.
fourth line.
Right.
It's using the indexes.
Okay, so this is important. So Ariel is making right? Is making an important point. And in this sense, it's a bit. No, it's not different from NumPy because indexes are starting at index 0. So it's the same as NumPy, but yes, this is both the index in Pandas sense and in a NumPy sense. Okay, 3 is actually the fourth line. Okay, but this is the same in Pandas and NumPy, right? So third line, fourth line is actually index 3, and column 2 is actually the third.
column.
So it should be this, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this is what it is. Okay, so this is important to explore. Now, this, you see, this is a scala. Okay, what we had before when we only put, when we did lock with the bracket, remember, we were getting a 1-by-1 data frame. Here we're getting a scala. Okay, this again, it's a major source of confusion. And you can access it, you can do the same with I@. Remember I told you about the @ So @ and lock are redundant in a way. But I@ is doing @ by position and it's selecting something as a scalar. Okay? Good. And we can slice just like we would do with NumPy. So try slicing your data. Okay, so iLock is letting you use your data frame like a NumPy array. This is the bottom line. Okay. So here, and there is another nice and not very intuitive way to use it. So let's say I don't want to slice it. I want line 1, 5, and 10, okay, with a discontinuum of lines, and I want columns 5 and 14, okay? So here I would put 1, 5, 7. Actually, I don't have 14 columns, but let's do 1 and 3, okay? And it's complaining. Why is it complaining? Because it's missing here a bracket. Okay, so here it shows the lines with index 1, 5, and 7, and the second and fourth column. And again, the nice thing about pandas, which is really helpful to reduce the amount of errors, is that you see that here it kept a record of the lines that you selected. Do you see this?
למה לא 3?
למה לא 3? 1, 5, 7 זה השורות, סבבה? ו1, 3 זה ה-columns. זה B ו-D. בסדר?
You can also change the order.
Yes. When you do this, it doesn't have to be in any order. D, B. Okay? Good. So these are ways, and you can also mix, of course. I hope you realize how rich Panda is. But let's do it. Let's do a mix. I'm not sure this would work actually. I think this would work. Okay, good. So here it's sliced in lines and selected specific columns. Okay, we've mixed slicing and picking. Okay, now our next topic is if we want to do Boolean indexing, and this is also super important. It's the bread and butter of the data analysis you will need to do for your research. So let's go back to our slides. Okay, so Boolean indexing allows you to select, there is a typo here, part of a data frame based on a condition. Okay, so again, I hope you realize there is in every research project, in every analysis project, you will want to do this. Okay, you're receiving the data, you want to select the data where a condition is true. Okay, so this is the basic syntax to do this. It's a very compact and easy syntax. Okay, so I'm showing you two distinct cases here. Here, what are you selecting? You're selecting the data frame where what? where column A is higher than 0. So you're selecting your people data set where the age is higher than 40, or where the eyes color is blue. Okay? Here you're doing something else. Okay? Here you're selecting the data frame where all the numbers are larger than 0 or meeting a condition. So this would happen probably in your project more often than this, okay? Because here you don't care anymore about the data types. This applies to data where everything is of the same type, right? So if you have ages and heights, it would select ages and heights higher than 40, okay? And this one is a very useful one too. There is a function called isIn, okay, which allows you to select the data based on a list of values, okay? So let's assume that you want to select ages, people of ages either 40, 51, or 60, okay? So I'm not sure there is a similar one in NumPy because I haven't used NumPy for this for a long time. But the isIn command allows you to do this, to select your data in a list of values. Okay? We'll see an example of this in a second too. Okay, let's look at an example now, and then we'll do a very short 5-minute break. So let's look at an example of this. Okay, so I want to select we're doing Boolean indexing, and you want to select all the data frame where A is larger than 0. Okay, so you do df. I actually like to divide this to write condition equal df A higher than 0, and then ask it to, okay, this is just for clarity, but you may not want to do this. I find it clearer. Okay, and it selected the data frame areas where A is higher than 0. Okay, now let's look at what happens if I try this other command that I showed you. I'm already telling you that it will complain. So let's try to print df where df is higher than 0. And why will it complain?
Hi.
Because we have, okay, pandas is happy to help you deal with mixed type, but it won't compare apples with bananas. So it will complain now. What? Ah, yeah, it's complaining. Okay, it's telling us that it's unhappy. So the way to do this is actually a good opportunity to show you how to remove data from a data frame. So there is a function called drop. Okay, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to define a new data frame called df2, which is equal to df where I dropped the first line. Okay, I want to drop this entire line. You can also, so drop also allows you to drop specific values, and then it will move things accordingly. Okay, if I only wanted to move this value, but then you need to be very careful. You want this entire row to go up, or you want this to be replaced by none. So it's easier. I'm going to remove the entire line. Okay, so the drop, so the way to do this is with labels equal 0 and axis equals 0. Do you remember that we talked about axis equals 0 and 1 for NumPy? Okay, so it's working in the same way. So df2 is this, is the same as df where I dropped the first line. Let's see.
You need to change the print.
Let's do print df2, and let's do now print. Let's see if this will work. It's still complaining. Why is it complaining? Okay. It's complaining. This is an interesting one. It's complaining because in spite of removing the first line, pandas still think that we're reading strings. Okay, so I need to add here as type float that will tell it. I used to have a high in my table, but I'm now asking you to read these numbers as floats and not as strings. Okay, pretty sure that, okay, and this is working. So what happened here? You see that the original data had 20 lines, right? Okay, and we could have thought that df2 will print us a smaller table, which would have only the values where df2 is higher than 0, right? But if you did this, you would have lost the information about which line each number is at, right? We don't want it to have, we don't want it to create a data frame with changing numbers of lines, and correct? So what it did here is that it filled all the tables with nones except in those positions where the condition is true. Okay? And this is a much safer way to behave, right? Because it doesn't produce a table where you've lost track of where the data was. Right, yes.
What was the problem with the original drop command that you had to add as type?
So it still thought that I'm giving it numbers in the form of strings. So I had to tell it, you're now reading numbers. Okay? Okay, and now I want to show you an example of this is-in function. Okay, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. And then I will show you magic things. So, okay, so for the is-in one, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to make a copy of my original data frame, and I'm going to add a column called E, and I will put in this column various values. So I'll tell you in a second what I'm doing. E5 equal 99 and df2 at. This is actually giving me the opportunity to show you how to set values in a data frame. Okay, so what did I do here? I made a copy of df because I wanted to keep df for future users. Okay, and then I made a new column called e, where I assigned all the lines to bonjour. Okay, and then I wanted to modify, because I want you to show, I'm trying to produce some data where I can show you how to select things based on the columns and a list of values. So I don't want all of the values in the E column to be the same. Okay, so I'm trying to setting specific values in the data manually to other values. Okay, so the way to set that, does it make sense for you what I mean by setting values? Okay, I'm trying to add values to the data frame manually. Okay, makes sense? I see your
this command is filling all the E with bonjour, all the
this,
E column.
This column is creating a long 20 element long columns with bonjour. What I will do in a second is we will print df2 in between and you'll see the difference. Okay, so here it's making a long columns with bonjour. Okay, here it's assigning with @ the @ command here is allowing me to assign values, to set values to other values. So here it's going to take the 5th index, so the 6th line number 6, column E, and it's going to put there 99. Okay, and here it's going to take index 8 to 10, column E, and put there shalom. Okay, so let's look at the results. Okay, so it's filled the line with bonjour, and then it added an index 599 and index 8 to 10 are shalom. Okay, the only reason I did this is to produce the example that I'm going to show you now. So I now want to, now my condition is the following. Okay, df2 E is in Okay, so what is it doing now? It's going to select values of column number E based on whether they belong to this list. Now, if I have a list which is 2 element long, I could very well do something simpler. I could do a condition where I say df2e equal to shalom or df2e equal to 99, right? I don't have to make a list. I can do a simple or condition, right? You're with me? Yes? But it becomes interesting when you have data which is 1,000,000 lines long and you have a list of values which is 1,000 lines long, and you don't want to put 1,000 or symbols in your code, right? So you can just tell it, pick from this list and select values for which the E columns belong to this list. Make sense? So let's try, let's see what it gives us. I'm missing here, maybe, yes. It's complaining that it wants parentheses. Okay, so what did it do? It looked at those values of my data frame where the E's column belongs to the list 99 and shalom, and it selected only this part of the data set, the data frame. Okay? So this is the third way to select data in a data frame based on a Boolean condition. So I'm going to show you one last thing and then we'll take a really short break before I show you some magic commands. So let's just, I quickly showed you the at method, how to assign values in a data frame. So in the same way that I can do assigning by columns, remember that I can also do assignments by position. So if I'm doing I at, okay, do you remember I told you that the I is specifying that it's by position? Okay, so if I do I at 0, index 0, 2, let's give it let's make it a capital so that we see it. Okay. Didn't like it. Why didn't it like it? Because okay. Okay, so let's make it a number.
What is it method?
Obviously, it's made it round. Okay, so you see that here I've used I at to do the assignment. Okay, and the reason it complained is again because you can assign things, but it will still want whatever you put in your data to match the original data types. Okay, so I could have put instead of the high, I could have put Hanukkah. Let's try. Because high is a string, so it's fine with changing, skipping a string with a string. Okay, it's added, you see, it's added Hanukkah here instead of high. It wants the new data that you're assigning to comply with the original data types. Okay, so good. So now let's...
אם אני רוצה לשנות את הסוג של הטייפ, איך אני כאילו במיקום המסוים מהו?
אני לא יודעת, אבל אפשר לבדוק את זה. And I'll show you one last way to assign, okay? This will end the topic on how to assign values in a data set. You can also assign, you can also give it a NumPy array, okay? If I do df lock equal to a NumPy array with 5 times the length of df. It's df2. Okay, so here what it did, okay, this was to show you an additional way to set values, to assign values. Okay, I gave it a NumPy array. So I gave it a NumPy array with the length of the data frame and it put it in the column D. Okay, so this is closing the topic on assigning new data to your data frame. And now let's take a 5-minute break, and in the remaining 15 minutes I will show you some very cool commands. So it's now 9 past 1, so let's be back at 15 past, okay?
מתי מסיימים היום?
בין וחצי ל-25 אני אחר את הסוף ב5 דקות, אבל אני רוצה שתהיו קצת תחדים בחלק האחרון. כן, שנייה, רק בודקת.
נגבה?
כן.
כן.
זה נותן לי להכניס אבל אני כותב בשורה שאף כתב זה אומר לשלפות את הסקלה זה נותן לי להכניס מספר מה זה סקלה?
מה ש... לא מינימליסטי. אני לוקח עוד 146.
תריץ את זה? זה לא עובד?
אז אני כבר אסתדר. 146 זה לדף שאתה מופיע. 164 זה אז מה שיגיע
לא, הם אמרו שזה טסט, לא, הם אמרו שזה טסט, לפעמים יכולים להגיד את זה להיום,
כל עוד אני לא יודע אני נושא בעיה להכניס
ממש מוזר, רגע, ואצלי זה עבד?
זה עבד אבל משהו אחר
יכול להיות שזה בגלל הוא תמיד היה סטרינגים
הוא אומר שזה יכול רק סקלה
לא, סקלה זה מספר
זה חייבים
לא רוצה שתשים
אגב, אני בעד ללכת לשפה
אם תכתבי שבמקום
לקחת אותה
האם לא אין לך זמן הגשה לא תעשה את זה בחיים?
לא, עשה את זה דווקא כאילו מה הייתי מתעניין משהו חשוב כאילו אני חייב
זה לא מעניין
להתחשב במבנה
צודק?
זה היה מאוד קשה
לא קיימות להגיש
קודם כל אתה צריך לעשות תאריך
זה קצת כל חמוד גן
אני לעצמי
יצא מדרוש שאני צבעת סגול לבן
יש לנו
זה המשמעות
אוקיי אז אני עכשיו קורא למשנה פי 2 פי 3 פי 4
במצרים
עכשיו המשוואה שלי כזאת פי 2 ועכשיו מה עשיתי? אני יודע את המשוואות האלה
כי עד היה מונדיאל
זה המשוואות
אנשים היו חוצים את הקו הירוק וכאילו
יש את המשוואות
או שמגיעים לאילת
אני מוצא את המטריצה שמגבילה את Q1 עוד Q2 עוד Q3 עוד Q4
את המונדיאל באמן
שמביאה את זה
זה היה פוסט המוד, היה אפשר לראות את זה מירושלים
נכון, הגענו לזה Q1 עוד Q2 עוד Q3 כאילו פה יצא מטריצת היחיד יותר טוב
לא, אבל
רגע,
אבל
אותו זה
הנה פה אתה רואה ש-Q2 דוד אתה מכפיל אותו באחד בשביל לקבל נכון, אין לו מקדם אין לו עם אחד ועוד עם שתיים אין לו איזה משהו תבין אין פה Q2 דוד פלוס Q3 דוד שווה לזה זהו, אם זה לא יוצא מטריצת היחידה אתה עושה את הפונקציה הזאת לחלק, כאילו אתה עושה את זה, לחלק למטריצה הזאת, כאילו מה שיוצא לך אבל זה לא מעניין כרגע, זה תנאי התחלה, נכון?
כן, עכשיו הלכנו למטלב
אתה רואה? זה ההתנגדות האוויר זה גרפיה פרסונלית, כי עשיתי כאילו זה ההתנגדות האוויר זה גם אוויר כי ביקשו פעמיים ביקשו ממך פעמיים פעם אחת שיש התנגדות פעם אחת שיש מערך של 2 אתה בא מגדיר את
זה המשוואה הראשונה
אתה רואה Q2 כן.
ממש ממש.
תלוי איפה אתה בחור, כפול Q2 כפול שורש Q2 בריבוע פלוס Q4 בריבוע.
Right, because before this we had a string that was a height. So when I tried to assign Hanukkah to 0, 2, it was complaining because here in 0, 2 I used to have a number and it only agreed to put a string in a place where there was a string. So before we had a string in 0, 1, there was a height, so we can write another string.
If it's float,
So you can, but you need to do some additional recasting. You can define that you can tell it to reach the number as strings, or it's not like you cannot do it, but you need to work a bit harder.
צריכתי אותו למזלם שלו, לא היה כזה נורא, אז יכולתי להמשיך להשתמש בו די הרבה זמן.
כל ההליך המחשבתי הזה.
Okay, so in the time we have left, I will show you 3 functions that allow you to do what we've done until now are things that you could do in NumPy. They may be a bit less easy to do, but if you really want to keep using NumPy, you could. These things I think are very specific to pandas. So there is a function called apply that allows you to apply a certain operation on your data frame. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So there is a function in NumPy that does the cumulative sum. Okay, so we'll see what happens. What it will do here, it will apply this function to all the columns of the data frame. Okay, so it will do a cumulative sum of all the columns. And here you can customize the function that you want to use. So this, I don't know if you came across this syntax for making functions. Okay, the lambda, did you see this? So this is a way to define a function in the same way that you would define in math. Okay, you give it x variable and then you define the function. So this is the function that associates, you give it an iterable, a list or an array, and it will associate it with it the max minus the mean of this list. Okay? So this apply function is basically applying a function, either an existing function from Python's library or a function that you as a user define, a customizable function. The apply function would apply this function to all the columns of your data frame. Okay? These are things that you can write in several lines of code, but you should know that you can also write it in one line of code because the pandas programmers thought about it before. Okay, I will show you how to concatenate columns. This is also bread and butter of data analysis. You may get your data from 2 separate files and you want to create one big file with the data, so concatenation is also very, very common. And the other magic function that I want to show you, which you need a bit of practice to use it, but once you start, it's very hard to stop. So it's called the group by function. And you will see that group by per se is not something you can use. You always use group by with an operation. So what is group by doing? It's grouping your data according to some criterion. Okay? So Python makes an object which has groups of data. So for example, in the example we gave, it would group the data by people of age 41, or group the data by eye colors, okay? And then you can perform an operation on this. So you can sum all the weights of the people who are 41 years old in your data, okay? Or you can subtract all the whatever. You can concatenate all the names of the people with a certain criterion on their heights. Okay, so I'll show you an example of this. But this is hardcore pandas. Like you can code it yourself, but if you know that it exists, it saves you a lot of pain and time. Okay, and the last example that I will give you, I personally don't use it that much, but it's very good to know that in the same ways that there is a very good interface between pandas and NumPy, you saw that we can easily turn pandas into NumPy and the opposite, and we can assign things into a panda data frame by giving it a NumPy array. Okay, it's the transition between pandas and NumPy, the interface is very smooth. So in the same ways, the interface between pandas and matplotlib, which allows you to plot things, is also super smooth. You can df.plot your data.
אני בכוונה גדולה?
זה לא בכוונה קטן, לא בכוונה, אני אראה לכם. But you can just dot plot your data and it will plot it. Okay? So again, like I usually use import matplotlib and plot dfa versus dfb. But if you're lazy and if you have good memory and you remember that this is built into pandas, you don't have to do this. It's already interfacing with matplotlib. Okay, so I'll show you an example of this too. Okay, so let's look at an example. Yeah, here your example is I'm like, okay, so let's go back to this. And let's give an example of a group by, and I've taken an example that I found online, which I think helps understand how we can use this. Where is it? This we did. 1 second. Okay, this is the data frame I want to use. Okay, so this we can get rid of. Okay, so I've made a new data frame here, which has 4 columns. Okay, column A, column B, column C, column D, and you see that I'm using here one of the 3 ways to define a data frame. I'm using the one that creates a data frame with a dictionary. Okay, so in the first columns I have all these names. In the second columns I have numbers written as strings, and in this other columns I have numbers. Okay, so let's look at this data. Okay, so I have here some words, so you can imagine a data with names. Okay, and here some strings and here numbers. Okay, and let's imagine that I want now to group the data frame. Take all the, let's assume that these are names. Okay, I want to take all the people called Foo, okay, and perform some operation on their age. Okay, let's make it more explicit. Name and C would be age. Okay, these are their names, these are their age, and D is their weight. Okay? So there is a magic comment that allows you to do this. I'm just going to check. So if I only do group by, I'm not getting much, okay? If I do group by, I will get something which is a function and is not telling me much. Okay, you see that it's printing this long function. I cannot use group by itself. Okay, but what I can do is apply things to group by, and the way I would do it is like this. So age and weight. Okay, dot sum. I think I need another pair of brackets here. Okay, and what is it going to do now? It's going to group it's going to group people by names, sum their age and sum their weight. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so I have two types of names here. I have people named Fu and people named Bar, right? And now it summed all the ages of the people named Bar and all their weights, and it did the same for Fu. Okay, so do you see how powerful this can be? It's doing the grouping for you. You don't have to select data frame by names and then do the sum, etc. It's doing all the grouping for you, and then it applies a function on these baskets, these groups. Okay, so this is something I strongly encourage you to play with, because it's not super intuitive, but it's super useful. Okay, so this was one example, and if you select on names and B, okay, you see that we have two columns. What happens if you select here by names and let's give it a more explicit okay, family name. If you select here by two criteria, it will show you the baskets. Let's have a look. No, it didn't like it. I think I'm missing some brackets. Okay, so you see that here it did some hierarchical grouping. Okay, it grouped by names, by Bar and Fu. And then within each name, it showed you all the different family names, and then did the sum. Okay, so group by, I will ask the tutors to do an exercise on this. It's really, really useful if you get used to using it. Okay, now let me show you the other example that Let's have a look at the plot thing, and next time I'll show you an example of apply. So here again I'm going to make some new data which will be nice to plot. So let's okay, so I'm importing matplotlib. Okay, this is classics. Then I'm closing all figures. This is something that is always good to do, okay? It doesn't have to do with pandas. And I'm defining a new data frame, which is just which has random numbers from 0 to 1000. Okay, actually, let's have a look at this data before we do anything. Okay, let's have a look at this data. So print, I'll actually show you two things here. Okay, so DF is just a long list of numbers, okay, and the indexes here are dates. Okay, this is how I chose to make my data. The indexes are dates, and here I have 1000 random numbers between 0 and 1. Okay, or maybe -1 and 1. And then I'm applying to this data frame CumSum, which is, so most NumPy methods are usable in pandas. So this CumSum function is doing the cumulative sum of my data. So do you understand what I mean by cumulative sum? The first number is just the first number. The second number is the sum of the two first. The third is the sum of the three first, etc., etc. Okay? And now, let's plot it. So I could, in principle, do plt.plot df, etc., etc. But I can just remember that pandas know how to plot things. You still have to use show, okay, to use these commands, otherwise it won't show it to you. And that's it, and it's plotting your data. So and most of what we said about matplotlib, colors, markers, etc., are usable as is. Okay, because pandas is not a new library for plotting things. It's just it's just calling matplotlib. Okay, so everything we did for when we started matplotlib, you can just use the same keywords, and they will be passed to matplotlib by pandas. Okay, so this ends what I wanted to discuss today about advanced topic in pandas. And next time we will talk about object-oriented coding. We won't talk anymore about pandas. Maybe I'll just use 5 minutes in the beginning of the next lecture to give you an example of the apply function, because I didn't have time to show it to you. But we won't speak much more on pandas, and yet it might be the most important thing we discussed in this course. Okay, for your everyday research use. So make sure you're strong on pandas. חג שמח. תשלח לי את הדוגמה הזאת.
אני בטוח שזה פשוט קשור, בטח משהו להתאמת ב-CSV הזה, משהו וזהו, אבל עדיין זה מטריד.